Yeah, okay, that's better. So let's learn the holy book of Yonah. So it's a very mysterious book. Goes without saying. I want to point out a few aspects that, core aspects of the book that we'll get to some of them today, and maybe next time we'll see if we can understand this a little deeper, understand some of these points. You have a Navi who's sent to a foreign nation, to the Gentiles. And while there are the Nevi'im who have prophecies about the Gentile nations, this is the only one where the Navi is sent to a foreign nation. And the Navi, as far as we know, starting from Sefer Shoftim, is something, is an institution for Klal Yisrael. Navi Akim Lohem, this function is for Klal Yisrael. And we have the story in the context of the Ego, when Moshe asks that the Shechina should not be Shoira on the Umis. So the concept of Asheras HaShechina and of Nevuah is something that's a Klal Yisrael kind of role. If Nevi'im would have a mission to the nations, then we could have had, Tanach would be 70 times larger. And there would always be these messages, tell them this, tell them that, and see what happens. It's always a relationship with Klal Yisrael. Here we have this very odd thing, very unique thing, that there's a Navi that's sent to a foreign nation, to the Goyim. Okay, and he refuses to go. So what's that about, of course? There's also this whole question of, should he die? He wants to die. A few times maybe, he throws himself overboard, and then at the end of the book he requests to die. And then we have this weird thing about a fish, and perhaps associated with that is the big focus on animals. The animals here also participate in the Tainus. And the book ends with this, it's Behema Rabbah. There's many animals in this city, so Hashem cares about this city. So I just want to point out those aspects of the Sefer. If we have to focus on what are the particularly interesting things here, I think that's what it is. We have a Navi L'Goyim, we have the avoidance of the Nevuah, and we have this whole crisis about his role and whether he should even live. And that we have, of course, this odd thing with the fish and other animals having great prominence. Okay, so that's just stating generally. What I want to do is now I want to read the first few psukim inside and comment on each word, and we'll see if we can put something together. I feel like I'm on to something interesting here that will shed some light into what the book of Yonah is doing, at least help us start understanding the message of this interesting book. Okay, so Vahi Devar Hashem. Now, the word Davar appears 7 times in this Sefer, which is an important number. The rule in Tanach is that there's this idea that Tanach repeats words when it wants you to notice it, and it repeats it also in oftentimes multiples of 7. And the word Davar indeed appears 7 times in this Sefer, and the Sefer is about the Davar of Hashem in a very fundamental way, because there's this struggle with whether Yonah is going to faithfully repeat the Davar. And his argument, his unclear argument at the beginning of Perek Daled, about why he refused originally, why he tried to avoid delivering the message, uses the word Davar in an interesting way. It's Perek Daled Pasuk Beis, where Yonah gives us the reason why he ran to Tarshish, which it doesn't say anywhere. And even here where it does say it, it's pretty unclear what he's saying. And he says, Haloi zed divari. So there's the Dvar Hashem, which initiates the Sefer, and okay, the Navis should be bearing the Dvar Hashem, but instead he has his own Davar, and this Davar was Ad Hayosi Al Admasi. Okay, when I was still Al Admasi, there's a focus in the Sefer of where Yonah is. He starts off in a place where he receives the Davar, that's Admasi, and then he wants to avoid the Davar, so he runs away, off from the land or into another land. Okay, fine. but the pasuk there. So I'm just pointing out we have the Dvar Hashem. The Sefer is about the Dvar Hashem. The word Davar appears 7 times, and Yonah's countering the Dvar Hashem, and it's imperative to be repeated and to be brought with his own Davar. And that's something that we have to understand what that argument is. Ki odati ki ato kil v'chan v'racham v'payim. What is he saying there? Okay, he knew that Hashem is kil v'chan v'chan v'chesed nichem al hara, so therefore he has his own Davar, and he's refusing the Dvar Hashem. Okay, that's just pointing out. Like I said, I want to read the words inside, make some drushes, and then I think we're going to get to some sense out of this. El Yonah. Okay, so let's talk about Yonah. So we have Yonah in a few different places where there are parallels to this Yonah. Of course, the famous one is in the Mabul, where the Yonah is the one who comes back to faithfully returns to Noach from the Mabul, from the water. And here we have another Yonah who's at risk of drowning, and also ultimately faithfully returns. Some of the other parallels are that there's a stress on Chamas, Kimollah haaretz Chamas, and here the tshuva of Nineveh was from the Chamas. Nineveh was given 40 days until they're going to be overturned, and the Geshem was al haaretz Abarim Yom Abarim Laila. Those are a few parallels. Okay. Another place I want you to look at is Yeshaya Perek Samach. Yeshaya Perek Samach also talks about Yonim, birds that are returned to their nests, and in that context also talks about boats that go to Tarshish. So that suggests that Yeshaya Perek Samach can illuminate Yonah. The pasuk I was talking about is so it's talking about the return of Bnei Yisrael to their land, which of course again that's a major focus in our sefer. That is Admasi, and he's running away, and ultimately he's brought back. And there it says pasuk ches Perek Samach pasuk ches in Yeshaya mi elech av tu ufena v'chayonim al rubaisem, like a Yonah who always returns to its nest, so do Bnei Yisrael are returning to their original home. So it's like Yonim, and then the next pasuk talks about the Aniyos Tarshish, the ships that travel to Tarshish, that are going to bring Bnei Yisrael back to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah?
No, meaning Aniyos Tarshish from Tarshish to Eretz Yisrael.
Correct.
The Yonah's boat, which was
right.
heading to Tarshish.
Right. So Yonah tried to take the boat and get away. Right. And the theme of Perek Samach in Yeshaya is Yisrael va'amim. So let's see, it says, the parak starts with saying that the world is going to be covered, the nations are going to be covered with darkness, but you're going to be illuminated, and then v'holchu goyim lo yirech. So there's going to be, the goyim are going to be covered with darkness, and you'll be illuminated, but then you're going to illuminate then, and then you're going to see everyone's going to be coming back from the foreign nations, right? And you see pasuk hey, the hamoin of the yam, so the yam is the ocean, it stands for the and the great sounds that the ocean makes stands for the great wealth of the nations, the Chel Goyim, which is going to return around and come back to you. So there's this idea that there's you and them, but they are going to contribute to your success because you're going to be flying back like birds, but they are going to be bringing you, right? And then they're going to serve you in Pasuk Yud, the Bnei Nechar. In Pasuk Yud Beis, if they don't, they're going to be in trouble. So it starts with saying there's you and there's them, and their success is going to depend on you, and they're going to realize that and bring you back. Okay, so that is a, and by the way, there in Pasuk Yud Ches, it says, Lo yishama id chamas ba'artzeich. Perhaps there may be other parallels there. There's the chamas that's associated with the foreign nations, and that has to be undone. And the way it's going to be undone is not that they're going to be rejected, but that they're going to bring you back. So some parallel here to Yonah, where he's using the ship, as you said, going the other way. He's trying to get away, but ultimately he ends up being brought back. And that tells us something. This is, I think, a significant point that we're going to get to tonight. This tells us something about the relationship of Yisrael va'amim. Like we have in Yonah, we're Ma'artzeich, where are you from, and Ivri Yonechi, and of course, Chazal about the 70 nations had representatives on that boat, and the lots refer to the idea that Klal Yisrael is chosen from among the 70 nations. Okay, and another place I want to show you is Sefer Nahum. Sefer Nahum is very important for understanding Sefer Yonah, because Sefer Nahum is also a vision about Nineveh. That's explicit in the first pasuk in Nahum. Masa Nineveh. Now, just to clarify, I said before that Nevi'im are not there for the nations. There are Nevuos about other nations. Such and such is going to happen. And I think that's always understood to be something that revolves around Yisrael. There aren't prophecies to the nations where they're sent on a mission to bring them a message, and certainly not to bring them a message that's going to incur change or induce change in the other nations, like Nevi'e Yisrael. Okay, so nonetheless, so we don't have a Navi that's sent to induce change among another nation except for Yonah to the Nineveh. But we do have a book about Nineveh, another book about Nineveh. That's Masa Nineveh. The whole sefer of Nahum is titled Masa Nineveh. And that sefer predicts utter destruction of Nineveh. And the first parak significantly, as we'll get back to this later, the first parak significantly describes Hashem's wrath and anger in the most vicious and cruel terms of the whole Tanach, in my opinion. We'll look at those a little later. It's very important, because that's in contrast. I'm drawing a contrast to say for Yonah, the first time that there was a message to Nineveh where Hashem is kind and has pity. And that's very important. This, according to Chazal, Nineveh was destroyed 40 years after Yonah came. And this is the destruction. This Masa Nineveh of Nahum is predicting the ultimate destruction of Nineveh, because although they did tshuva, it only helped them for 40 years. The 40 days of Nineveh Peches turned into 40 years. We know that can happen already. And but then Nahum delivers the fatal blow and says this time it's for real. And what I want to just point out over there is that in Perek Beis pasuk Ches, it says that the maids of Nineveh are going to be moaning kikol yoinim, like doves. So just want to make that zushtel to Yonah. Okay? So I want to dash in the pasuk here. The way we figure things out, we dash in the words and then it comes together. So we'll see it comes together. We'll see something interesting and compelling is going to come together here as well. Ben Amitai. Okay, so what can we say about this interesting name that seems to have something to do with emes, with truth? So the word emes does not appear in Sefer Yonah, and that's extremely significant because there's a place where it should appear. And that is in Perek Daled, Perek Daled pasuk Beis, the pasuk we looked at before, where Yonah says he knew something about Hashem. And that's why he had his own davar, when he was still on his own Adamah. And what did he know about Hashem? Kiato elchanun v'rachum, erech hapayim v'rav chesed, v'nichom al ha'ra'ah. So of course, Kilchanun v'rachum, erech hapayim v'rav chesed is a quote from Parshas Kisisa, from the Parsha the Egel. He puts chanun before rachum, there it says rachum v'chanun, but otherwise, it's clearly a quote from there. Kilchanun v'rachum, erech hapayim v'rav chesed, v'nichom al ha'ra'ah. Kisisa doesn't say that. It says Kilrachum v'chanun, erech hapayim v'rav chesed, v'emes. Yonah replaced emes in the quote with nicham al ha'ra'ah, which is very important because maybe Hashem was not acting with the midah of emes here, because he said oy dabarim yom b'nei peches, and instead something else happened, nicham al ha'ra'ah. So then I think perhaps there's a clue to understanding the sefer that Yonah, who's patronymic, or upon him his secondary name, Ben Amitai, involves something to do with emes, and his mission indicated to him that there was a lack of emes in Hashem. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to jump the gun, but Pasuk after the revised boy.
Yeah.
It says Ish v'hem Ish Elio.
Right.
After Zayadati Ish Elikim Ata Itvar Hashem B'Ficha Ames.
Right. I heard that part from the from the Shir. Right. So it says by Eliyahu that she told him, "Now I know, ki dvar Hashem b'ficha emes." Right. So we have the dvar Hashem, And here we have a Dvar Hashem to Yonah ben Amittai, Yonah who Eliyahu was Mechayim Mesim. And he's Yonah ben Amittai, so he should be Emes, but he's saying, no, look, I'm not doing your mission. I don't want to do the mission, the Dvar Hashem, because I have a different Davar, which doesn't have Emes. It's Nichum al Ra. So maybe this is not the Dvar Hashem Emes. And so what I'm getting at, I think this points us to understanding what the tension is here, why Yonah can't do what he's doing, can't do what he was charged to do. There's some inherent conflict, some inherent contradiction here in his mission. Okay. Kum lech al Nineveh ha'ir ha'gedolah. So, since we're noticing words, the word gedolah appears, the root of great, appears 14 times, also a multiple of 7, 14 times in the Sefer, which is very interesting. I don't know why that's the case. Ukra aleha. Ukra aleha. It's a very interesting expression. And later, when in Perek Gimel, when Hashem speaks to Yonah a second time, he says again, Kra aleha es hakriya. So there's a call. There's a call. Very interesting expression, which I want to draw a parallel to Vayavar Hashem al panav vayikra, Hashem Hashem kerach mechanon. There's a kriya. The kriya is calling out the essence. In other words, this is not a message of with a particular content. This is the call. Vayikra b'shem Hashem. What does it mean to be kar b'shem Hashem? So again, we look back again to Parshas Kisisa, which is, as we'll see, has more parallels to the Sefer, to the Kriya of Moshe of Kel Rachel Mechanon. That is the Kriya. So he's supposed to be Kaireh, he's supposed to bring the Kriya B'Shem Hashem, generic Kriya B'Shem Hashem, to Nineveh. Okay? That's what I would suggest.
Is there a difference?
I'm sure there is. Do you have any ideas?
I think initially, in the Malbim says that Yonah was just commanded to go speak generally.
Firstly, he was commanded to go speak.
Fulfilled his commandment.
That's who says that again? Rasag, I think. I know, but it comes from earlier. Like I think the Ben Ezra brings from the Rasag.
And later on,
Why do they want to say that again? That he fulfilled it? Oh, because what was he thinking? Like they tried. What's his whole business? Right? He fulfilled it. He ran away, so it shouldn't happen a second time. Right? That's what I think comes from Rasag. Right? Then what's he thinking? How could you not do what I should? How could a navi be kovish nevuasa? Right? This is the big mystery. So they want to say he actually did it. Karas Akriya. And then he ran away, so they shouldn't. He didn't want anything to happen again. Interesting.
I don't know if they had this point, but I wonder if Eleha was more specific.
Yeah. Well, there it says Es Akriya Asher Ani Dover Elecha also. Yeah, right. So he's in Kra Eleha. Maybe he's like, okay, let's go there and
Preach.
Right. And here it's targeted, a direct message. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Right. Okay. So let's talk about he's going to Nineveh. As we said, here we have this interesting phenomenon of Navi L'Gayim. And I would suggest that this is very critical to understanding Yonah's hesitation and his problem. Let's look at the pasuk at the end of Perek Gimel. This is another pasuk that's basically cut and paste from the Maaseh Ha'egel. Okay, what's the pasuk? Vayar as Maseim kishavu midakam hara'ah. Vayinochem Elokim al hara'ah asher diber la'asais lahem v'lo yasa. Right? What's the pasuk in the Egel? Vayinochem Hashem al hara'ah asher diber la'asais le'amoy. Ha. So I want to read this pasuk at the end of Perek Gimel as a contradiction to the pasuk in Kisisa, because the pasuk in Kisisa is not merely telling us. Let's go and look into Parshas Kisisa. We'll see the pasuk is not merely telling us who it is that Hashem regretted doing evil to. It's telling us why Hashem was bisnachim. Vayinochem Hashem al hara'ah la'asais asher diber la'asais is because it was le'amai, because it's his people. Therefore, vayinochem Hashem al hara'ah. So therefore, this pasuk is subtly undermining and contradicting the very pasuk that it's quoting by using a pasuk that's saying something special about Amoi and applying it to non-Amoi. And the way I see this is because in the Egel story, the fact that we are Hashem's Am it occurs repeatedly. It's a very important theme. It starts in, it starts in, really in Perek Lamed Beis, Pasuk Zayin, where Hashem says to Moshe, Shiches Amcha. Your nation was shiches. So I'm done with them. And Moshe responds in Pasuk Yudal and says, Loma Hashem Yecher Abcha Be'amecha. No, he didn't accept that it's his people. It's your people. So therefore, Vayinochem Hashem, based on that argument, you see, because Moshe put that back and said, no, it's not Ami, it's Amcha, it's your people. Therefore, Vayinochem Hashem, Hashem accepted the argument and was misnachem because he considered it Amai. Okay? And then it continues, and it takes us to Perek. No, this is on Shavas B'Tammuz, right? And then there's 40 days. By the way, we'll talk about that's another 40 days that the Medrash connects to the 40 days of Nineveh. But let me show you the Amai first over here. So in Perek Lamed Gimel, Hashem says to Moshe, "You and the Am. I'm going to send a Malach." And Moshe says to Hashem, Pasuk Yud Beis, this Am, Re'ei ki amcha hagoyazeh, Pasuk Yud Gimel. No, it's your Am. That's the argument here. And furthermore, Moshe says in Pasuk Tazayin, me and your Am, neflilu aniva amecha mikol Am. Me and your Am have to be different than every Am. And how is that? So according to Chazal, that the Shechina is not Shoira on the other Amim. So you see that in the Egel, where Hashem accepts that we are His Am, and therefore He's Misnachim, in that same context, He also vouches that we are going to be Neged Kol Amcha Esen Niflois Asher Libu B'Cholot Cholam. Whatever. So we'll see that pasuk soon. But this pasuk too, Niflinu Aniva Amecha. In that we are the only nation that has prophecy. So the book of Yonah, where there's a prophet, although he's not a non-Jew, but he's being sent to the non-Jews, and he brings to them the same Hanhaga, which is in this Egel story, is directed to Klal Yisrael uniquely because they are the nation of Hashem. And then he quotes that pasuk and shifts it, the same pasuk, he shifts it to a foreign nation, which again I'm inserting stands in conflict and contradiction to the Egel story, where Vayinochem Hashem happens only because we are Amai. In other words, read the Egel story, and it suggests that if there's a decree against non-Amai, then Hashem won't change His mind. Because what? Because the reason why Hashem was Misnachim is because it was Amai. And here we have the Nineveh story where Hashem is Misnichem al Ra, even though it's not Amai. It's a stira. Another stira that goes in line with that, I maintain, is the fact that the Egel story says that since we are His Am, we are the only ones who are going to have Nevi'im, Washras HaShechina, which is Nevuah. And as that pasuk design, there's the whole Adama, and then there's a very unique Adama, which is Eretz Yisrael, and that's Ad Hayosi Al Admasi, the Yonah reference. My Adama, the Adama of the Ani Va'amcha, and that Adama has Nevuah, not Asher Al Pnei Adama, and the story of Yonah is going in that direction. Because here we have a anhaga towards non-amcha people. That's really the anhaga that's supposed to be for the Am Hashem. Okay, and you have this again. Amcha appears again in the next parak. We don't have to see every time, but there's a major theme in the Egel story about who's the Am. Yeah, you see this?
I get not to jump the gun, but I mean, is that...
You can jump the gun.
Is kind of, I see what you're saying about the ego, but on the flip side, how do you see that Nineveh is not an Am of Hashem? Maybe it's not the Am of Hashem.
Okay, that's a great question. Right, so how do we define Am of Hashem? Is that what you're asking?
Basically.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like foreshadowing like Coach Ruffles' interaction with the end of the Sefer, where he says, you didn't create the Kikai and make yourself upset.
Right.
I shouldn't be upset about Nineveh. The Mashmal says...
Yeah, but it's interesting because... I know, but you know what's funny is that it doesn't really do that over there. It says, it should have gone like this, right? You cared about the Kikrai and Ashalim that I was raised, right? Right. It says like, oh, there's a lot of people there and animals. Like, what a waste, you know? Weird, right? So that's another... something going on there. In other words, I mean, I think this is actually a very big clue that the concern for Nineveh is actually turns out to be on a par with the concern for animals. So, okay, I think that's something to think about. And that takes us back to the Mabul. It's back to the Mabul, the Yonah and the Mabul, where it's like, okay, we care about animals. Why do we care so much about animals in the Mabul? What's that all about? Are humans and animals the same or not? That's a Mabul question, a very important Mabul question. I think that's the clue maybe for next year that might actually solve what I'm putting forth in this one. But that's jumping the... Now we're jumping the... Okay. So, but talking about the Egel, I just want to point out some other parallels to the Egel. I think I mentioned the 40 days, right? So there's 40 days in the Peches, and there are 40 days of Moshe in the Har, and the Alkut Shemedi says that Vayinochem Hashem al Ra Asher Diber Lasas La'amah means he gave them 40 days. Why? And I think it makes Gzei Shava from Vayinochem Hashem to Nineveh, and they had 40 days to get their act together. So to over here 40 days, and then the 40 days later was Yom Kippur. They gave him 40 days, and then Yom Kippur, and then we'll see what happens. Something like that. Also, when Moshe had his vision of Hashem, it says V'sakoisi es kapi olecha. Moshe had a vision of what? The Yud Gimel Midas. Hashem Hashem Karachim B'chanun. So I just want to point that out. If it's not clear to you yet, the fact that Yonah quotes Hashem Hashem Karachim B'chanun, so we have to read the Sefer Yonah. That tells me to read the Sefer Yonah in line with Kisisa. Just he's quoting the Egel story, right? Pasha. And again, Asher Veinochem, and again 40 days. And he sits in a sukkah at the end of the story, and Moshe is protected, v'sakoisi, which is the same word as sukkah, by Hashem when he has the kriya, vayikra b'shem Hashem, Hashem Hashem karach b'chanun. And also, what's like one more parallel that which Ibn Ezra points out, that Yonah asking to die, he says is like Moshe saying mechenina. Okay, which I would have said actually, it's like perhaps it's shaykh to lo yirani ha'adam v'choy. There's like, okay, do you have to be dead to see Hashem? Do you have to be alive? And so I want to read this, that is the Dvar Hashem, which is like, this story is about the Dvar Hashem, the Shlichus of Nevi'im, and that's of course related to their Hasaga of Hashem, and the Kriya of Hashem, which is Hashem Hashem Karachim B'chanun, the Midas, the Drachim of Hashem. And there's always this tension of life and death in that regard, which I just don't want to hear what you're saying, but I want to just add one point. Eliyahu Navi, another place which is shaykh, that is he goes 40 days in the desert. He lies down under a tree and also asks to die, and then he goes to the same cave that Moshe Rabbeinu had his vision of Hashem Hashem Karachim B'chanun, and Hashem appears to him too. So that's another third place where we have this death wish or possibility of death. 40 days. There, by the way, Eliyahu goes Mahalach. He walks a one-way journey, and here we have Yonah going Mahalach Yamech, another parallel. And he goes to sleep under a tree, and the Malach wakes him up, and he goes 40 days, 40 nights, and he asks to die. So I want to show that there's something about the fundamental question over here, or the fundamental issue is the mission of a Navi. Moshe, the chief of the Nevi'im, and his mission, and his asking of Hashem to give us Nevi'im, so that we're unique, that we have Nevi'im. And in that context, we learn something about the Drachim of Hashem, so that we can be Nevi'im, and what we learn is Hashem Hashem Karachim B'chanun. And death comes in there a lot. Maybe we'll get to that. Not today, not this time. And Yonah as well is taking some of that davar, and he's shifting it because he replaces MS with Nicham al Ra, and he's applying it probably where it doesn't apply. But again, like you asked, for excellent point. Why am I assuming this is not the Am Hashem? What does it take to be the people of Hashem? There's no indication in this book that the people of Nineveh are not Hashem's Am, right? No indication. At least we say that. No indication that it is. We have that pasuk at the end. But we're still no indication that it's not. Obviously, my assumption that's not the Am Hashem is because, well, they're not Am Yisrael. So, it's by the way, it's an interesting question whether they're idolaters. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. But what you were going to say something?
I was just going to point out another parallel that Moshe was 40 days followed by 40 years of class from the Midbar. Nineveh, 40 days of mourning, followed 40 years later.
Very nice. So I was going to repeat that further in case it was picked up. So like the 40 days of Moshe ended up being the 40 years in the desert, so to the 40 days of Nineveh ended up being 40 years until Nineveh's destruction. Right, okay. What would it take to be the nation of Hashem? Probably not to be do Avodah Zarah, at a minimum. Were the Nineveh people idolaters? So I saw two conflicting ideas. One is that they clearly weren't, because all they had to do was tshuva from the Chamas. What happened to Avodah Zarah? And then someone else says, no, that Hashem forgave them despite the fact that they were idolaters, as long as they did tshuva from the Chumas, and that's why Yonah was upset, because Klal Yisrael is held to a higher standard. But anyways, but to your question of are they the Am Hashem, I would imagine depends on who their God is, right? So they don't seem to have another God here. So there's an interesting relationship with Hashem, right? It's a very interesting relationship with Hashem. At least they were open to a message from Hashem, right? At a minimum, that's right. So does that make them the people of Hashem? Okay. Right. So what's that? By Aminu. Okay, that's a very significant pasuk, right? That's a very significant pasuk. Does that mean they came to believe in him, or just that they believed in this particular word? Was that like a conversion of sorts? Because we have this conversion theme about the people in the boat, right? The Medrash says they all became Gerim. Okay, so I want to read the book like this. I want to read the book that it's this book is revolving around the question of Yisrael va'amim, as that pasuk as that parak in Yeshaya, parak Samach, that talks about that question of basically our relationship with the nations. That on the one hand, just to repeat what that parak is teaching us, there's nuance there, which is that they are in the darkness, we are in the light, but nonetheless they will receive light from us and they will participate in that glory. So there's something interesting going on over there. There's a complicated relationship between Yisrael and Amim. And I want to read the Sefer about that as well. Okay. So let's see. I mean, where does that take us? So let's turn to Sefer Nahum, which Sefer Nahum is a sequel. As we mentioned before, Sefer Nahum is a sequel to Sefer Yonah. And importantly, in Sefer Nahum is where Nineveh is told, this is it. Now you're really being destroyed. And as I mentioned, Sefer Nahum begins with the most cruel and vicious description of Hashem's midas in all of Tanach. Let's read the psukim, because they're really powerful. If you want to scare yourself, like a Baal Musar, you can learn these psukim. Masa Nineveh Sefer Chazai Nahum al-Kashi El kanoi v'noikim Adonai noikim Adonai v'al chemo noikim Adonai l'tzor v'noitu l'oivav. Okay, so noikim Baal chemo Adonai achapayim ugdol chesed v'naki lo yanaki ugdol koyach v'naki lo yanaki Adonai b'sufa b'sor darki v'onun v'avakrak. Right, so it doesn't say chesed. He says achapayim, great koyach v'naki lo yanaki, which, depending how you read that, as it doesn't completely erase a sin. And then it says he comes in storm. Goyer by Yom Vayabeshehu, he could dry up the sea, he could dry up the forests, the Levanon withers, the mountains tremble from him. Who can stand from his anger? Lefnei Zamoy miyamer miyokum b'charin apoy. And the Tov Hashem l'moiz b'yom tzedei chosed, but if you trust him, you're good. But otherwise, you're in big trouble. If you're an enemy of God, darkness will chase you. Kolahu is destroying. Okay. So here we have this description of Hashem as being vicious, kind of a noikim, bal chema. Again, and pasuk base stresses l'tzorav and oivav. And he comes in a storm, and everyone, no one could stand his anger. And he's also referencing the Yud Gil Midas. He says Hashem Erchapayim, Gdol Koyach, Ranakelo Yanake. But Nahum focuses Be'ikr, he does say Erchapayim, on the Sefer of the Yud Gil Midas, Poiket of an Ovis, the Noikim, the negative parts, or the Midas Adin we call it, right? So if we read Nahum as a sequel to Yonah, I think we also have to look at it. If you want in Pashkis has Kel Rachum Mechan Rechapayim Chesem Emes Noitzach Esalav Noitzim Poiket of an Ovis Albonim. Okay, Menakelo Yanake. In Sefer Yonah, and it has emes. Sefer Yonah, it's all we get is a partial view, and emes is actually switched out for Nicham al Ra. If you want the full picture of Yud Gil Midas, which you always have the full picture, there's no such thing as only having a half picture. So that's why the people of Nineveh, there have to be two books about them, because if one book only presents half of the Yud Gil Midas, that's not the full kriya, right? It's krolas a kriya. The kriya is Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. V'ikra b'Shem Hashem is Hashem kerachum uchan rechapayim v'chesed emes etzachas alalof noisim v'vesh chatom v'nakei poken avanovis etc. V'nakei lo yanakei, right? So we need to have that. We need to have that aspect, the midas adin, has to be there in the Kriya on Nineveh. So therefore, Sefer Nahum is, I want to read Sefer Nahum as being mashlim, being the sequel to Sefer Yonah in terms of bringing the destruction onto Nineveh. It's also being mashlim, the Kriya, and the midas of Hashem. Okay? So then I want to say like this, that essentially, and this is just like I said, this is sort of a Pesach, we have to think about this. Yonah ben Amittai is not accepting the Devar Hashem because there's an inherent, this contradicts the true nature. The story of Yonah taken on its own contradicts the Devar Hashem as it's given the expression of emes, like you said, the Devar Hashem beficha emes. The Devar Hashem emes, which obviously has to be rooted in Torah of Moshe, contradicts the mission of Yonah, because according to the Devar Hashem emes that says in the Sefer of emes in Torah of Moshe, there shouldn't be a nicham ala ra'ah. Instead, there should be emes to anyone that's not Amoi, and there shouldn't be even a mission of Hashras Hashchina, of Nevuah, to anyone but Amoi. So what is going on over here? Okay, so there's a tension over here. Now, what's the answer to that as a real, like as a kasha on the Torah? I'm not up to there yet. Probably has something to do with maybe they are potentially Am Hashem, at least potentially. Okay, so Sefer Yonah might be referring to some potential, like going back to the parak in Yeshaya, parak Samach. After you read that parak, well, where do the other nations stand? They are on the one hand, they're in the darkness, but on the other hand, they're illuminated by us. So, are they part of Hashras Hashchina? Since they participate, are they Am Hashem? So maybe we should look at that parak and see if we get some clues. But in a face value, at least, Nineveh is not Am Hashem, and in fact, the book of Nahum proves the point of Yonah. As I was saying, that the story of Yonah is a half story, because actually the Kriya was not Chal. The Kriya of the Amidas of Hashem, including Perkei Rav and Nake Lo Yanake, was actually not Chal on Nineveh until Nahum brought the second half of the Yud Gimel Midas onto Nineveh. And the book of Nahum ends, the second to last pasuk talks to the king of Ashur and says, "Your Am is spread out on the mountains, and nobody's mekabetz them. Your Am." So the point is made in Sefer Nahum that they are the Am of the king of Nineveh. The king of Nineveh, of course, figures prominently in Yonah as well, and that may be significant because the people of Nineveh didn't respond to the call of Hashem. The people of Nineveh responded to their king, who responded to the call of Hashem, which tells us that maybe they are not the Am Hashem. Rather, if they're not the Am Hashem, whose Am are they? So, on the analogy to the Egel, Hashem says to Moshe, "They're your people. You're their king. They don't do with me." And Moshe's like, "No, they're your people. I'm just here to remind them. Whatever." Where does Nineveh fit into that? So, the fact that Nahum ends with a message to the king of Nineveh, "Your Am," is nobody cares about your people. And then we could say, "Hey, look and say for Yonah, they don't actually respond to Hashem directly. It's their king who responds to Hashem, and they respond to the king." That suggests that maybe they're not the Am Hashem. So there's perhaps a possibility for that to be the Am Hashem. Okay, we have to see how this works out. Okay, but I'm done. So let me just finish my point. Basically, my point is that I raised some questions there. I don't know how to put it all together. But that the reticence of Yonah is because this is not the Dvar Hashem Emes, and this taka conflicts with his name, which is Amitai, and he's supposed to bring Emes, and he can't. And not only does it conflict with his name, but it conflicts with the Yud Gimel Midas as they are expressed in Kisiso, including Emes. And Yonah is only able to say half of them. And there's something inherently wrong with that. That's not the Dvar Hashem. And furthermore, another thing which probably relates to that, but I don't know how, is that he's bringing a message to the Amim, who are not the Am Hashem, bringing a message that allows for Vayinochem Hashem. It really shouldn't be, and really there shouldn't be Nevuah to Akum B'chlal. So that's how I would approach this inherent problem of Yonah. It's interesting because, like, B'chlal, this is like a general point I always make. Like, people are going to read Yonah like, "Oh, how did the Navi not listen to Hashem?" Like, I don't like that question. I really don't like that question. First of all, go figure out what a Navi is and then ask that question. I don't know, it's not like it's like You ask me, how did the Chavetz Chaim didn't put on tefillin one day? Yeah, that's Taka Kasha. It doesn't make sense. Because I understand the Chavetz Chaim put on tefillin, because he would not be Shemai for not put on. I understand that. But what does it mean to be a Navi? So on and so forth. But more importantly, I think we have to learn a sefer like this. We have to understand what is the message in the Navi not doing it. That also is Torah. So I think that's what I'm trying to get to over here. That there is a built-in tension to this thing. The Navi can't just go to a guy and give them a message. Like, that's not supposed to happen. That contradicts everything we know. So, and indeed, when he was sent, he only brought a half of the Kriya, and things didn't work out, and he didn't want to go. He had to not go as well. I don't see it as like, he should have gone. Did he, everyone always wants to know, did he do something wrong? Like, let's learn it up. That's all we can do is learn it up. Okay, that's my parenthetical part. What's your comment?
That's the first step to getting to...
Is what?
Saying looks like he did something wrong.
Right. True. Yeah, that's true. Right. No, I agree with you. That questions are good as a way of opening things up. People usually think questions need answers. Like, I don't want the Navi to do something wrong, so go defend him. I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
I want to offer another passage, maybe with Darshan.
Yeah.
I
I didn't think about that. That's interesting. There's only one Yonah. Beautiful. So there's one Yonah, but everyone else is very impressed by it. So you're saying that's Klal Yisrael. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's one way to read this book, which is like that Yonahs is a stand-in for Klal Yisrael, and they have the shlichus to the nations, and they're not so interested in doing it. And if they don't do it, they get thrown overboard of the ship. It's like a very push-up shot in a way. They have a message, they have a mission to the nations. They're not so interested in their mission to the nations. Yeah, we know about that. And the thing is that the ship, as in the whole world, starts breaking if the Jews don't fulfill their shlichus. So the Gentiles throw the Jew overboard, and like that doesn't work either because,
And the Jew wishes to be dead.
Right? The Jew has a death wish, and they're like, fine, just don't blame us or whatever, as long as God doesn't punish us. And but the Maisi comes back, So yeah, that's great. Okay, Achasi Enasi Samasi, beautiful. Okay, so I think this is a good start.